back to the MILELE readings. We are on chapter 32. Yes, 32. Let's recap 31. So Hope and Boa did address the population of Eden too. And Hope did do a good job, even though she had been really nervous about it. The most important reminder to the people were to obey their sovereign emperor in the fullest love and to channel that love in care for all humanity. We were also reminded that the one behind the Weltschgeese was an actual honored agent of the sovereign emperor who rebelled and who had a portion of the emperor's agents follow him. And they have a great hatred for humanity, especially that mere humans were given authority over the earth. Agios seems more occupied than ever, so we get a sense something is going on. Also, a Council of Nations attorney has shown up on the island claiming that they would have to hand over baby Moses since he is really should be considered a ward of the Council of Nations state. Oh boy. And the Watcher has targeted baby Moses and also has indicated that his time is drawing to an end on the island. He also gives some indication that those who work for the Weltschgeese are in small places from just cities all the way up to states and countries, all the way up to his master, all feed off the shallowest selfishness of human to the greatest depravity. Ooh. Okay, so let's move on to chapter 32. And we are on the Mediterranean Sea with Faith and Nathan. Now, there's a shift in their relationship, as you must have noticed. So, which is a good thing for Nathan, but it's still kind of iffy under the situation, the circumstances that they're in of the world, and Hope's desire to still, Faith's desire to still be working for the world. Okay. Mediterranean Sea. Gentle currents of a warm afternoon breeze swirled around Nathan as he strolled along the outer passageway of the merchant vessel. So they have indeed left Sicily. It was perhaps half the size of the cargo ship that had brought them to Sicily, but it was better quality. It belonged to their host family, which meant their freedom was less restricted. Everyone, from the captain to the least member of the crew, were loyals and staunch supporters of the underground Israeli loyals. How long would this subversive resistance go undetected? It was hard to know. Nathan paused, put in his hands on the rails, and looked across the water. He thought back to his time in Sicily. Saying goodbye to his host family had been difficult. As much as his interaction with them had been limited, an inexplicable bond had formed. The priceless bonus, of course, was the time he'd spent bonding with Faith. It was clear now that she shared his feelings. She didn't openly confess, nor did she deny it. The silence was enough for him to know. She was, after all, put in a difficult position. She was his highly skilled security and guide back to Eden, too. Romance was never supposed to be part of the equation. Something moved in his periphery. Hurrying toward him from the other end of the passageway was the woman in his thoughts. It was still weird being able to see more than a few meters ahead. The mist had been rapidly dispersing, and each new day confirmed it. And while this was worthy of celebration, it also meant the Council of Nations would already be moving ahead with plans to take full control of the world. Faith was now close enough for him to notice the worry on her face. Loose curls had escaped her ponytail, and she was breathing hard. "It's happening," she said in a panicked whisper. It was so unlike her. Grabbing his arms, she continued, "The internet is fully operational in Israel and expanding to the rest of the world. I just received word through the ship." Dread washed over Nathan. Too soon. It wouldn't be long before the rest of the world was accessible. He'd hoped to have reached Eden too before this occurred. He raised his hands to cradle her elbows, giving her support. "Unless the 3 descending members of the council have changed their position on a one-world government, then we may still have time," he said. Yet even to him, the words sounded unconvincing. At his last Council of Nations meeting, there had been considerable pressure from the other 7 council members to have everything in place so that once the internet was accessible, the world envoy would become the first man to rule the entire world. "How can one man rule the world?" Faith asked rhetorically. Nathan knew she had the same answer he did. Not only was it possible, it would happen. "What about those who voted against it?" She stepped away from him and faced the water. He moved behind her and rested his hands on her shoulders. "Keiko Baines is a mastermind of deception," he said, "and manipulation. The 3 holdouts secretly claim to be loyals, but they're also sitting on the fence. If Hope joins Keiko, they and other wavering loyals like them would most likely fall on his side." Faith's shoulders were tense under his hands, as if she was unwilling to accept his words. Slowly, he pulled her back until she was leaning against him. He wrapped his arms around her, and he rested his head against her. "With his presence on Eden 2's waters, he has convinced the world that he's there because my sister has agreed. It's a lie, of course, but he'll do whatever it takes to masquerade the deception. But you, I, and true loyals know. As followers of Prince Adani, we could never bow to the leadership of a man who's clearly under the sway of the Velshis." "And your sister Hope?" she asked. "Most of all, she knows." Eden 2. Rather than comforting her, the compassion in Colonel Davenport's eyes made Hope even more uneasy. She was used to his stern, steely stare and his no-nonsense barked orders. He was Eden 2's strong, unshakable buffer. However, after hearing the reason for the Council of Nations summons, the buffer suddenly seemed deflated. Now, sitting in the interrogation and debriefing chamber, with the dome looming in the background, and peace-suited people across the table from her, Hope's anxiety increased. There was some comfort having Governor Peter sitting right beside her, but the attorney was right there across from them, while his 2 attendants stood behind him, very much on duty. From the head of the table, Colonel Davenport made the introductions. Governor Peter acknowledged the new visitors and then asked the attorney to present his case. Hope listened to their demands, which were more detailed than Colonel Davenport had given. For the first time, she felt something other than fascination or fear for the world envoy. At that moment, she hated Keiko Baines. "So what you're saying is it's either her or the child?" Governor Peter asked. He leaned forward, almost threatening. Once she steps foot on the Council of Nations ship, the attorney answered nervously, all rights to the child would be waived by the Council of Nations. His gloved hands were clenched over the documents on the table before him. Then he would be given special status to become a citizen of Eden too. Silence. The attorney looked down, seemed to swallow with difficulty, then looked directly at Hope. If Ms. Kanisa refuses to appear, then... He swallowed again. Then we will not release the child. Appearing... What do you mean? Hope asked. What do you mean you will not release the child? Appearing more nervous, the attorney stuttered. By now, we have the child. Hope's breath caught in her throat. The pea suits swam. Hope? Hope? She couldn't breathe. Hope? Governor Peter called again. He was twisted sideways in his seat with his hand pressing against her shoulder. Hope's ears unclogged, and she realized that choking sounds were coming from her. Her breath dislodged. You have baby Moses? The attorney nodded. We'll not harm the child, of course, but we'll take him away unless Ms. Kanisa appears. I will go. Hope, Governor Peter began. We can't let you do that. Threatening tears burned. Her heart squeezed. Ignoring Governor Peter, Hope spoke to the attorney through clenched teeth. Go, tell him now. But just know I will not step foot off this island until my baby is back safe and sound. Colonel Davenport. It was Captain Nick, standing by the door, looking unusually ruffled. It's urgent, sir. May I have a word, please? Still looking visibly disturbed at the news about baby Moses, Colonel Davenport mumbled his apologies and hurriedly excused himself. It didn't take long for Hope to make up her mind. Her chair screeched as she shoved it back, intent on following the men out of the room. Just outside of the room, and before Governor Peter could reach her side, she arrived to hear Captain Nick's words. Ruth Harris and Anna Davis, caregivers of little Moses, are here, frantic. They claim the child is missing. Boy. New scene. Hope was sitting up in bed, hugging her knees, leaning against the bed head. Just as her small table lamp failed to completely illuminate her room, so her feeble attempts to focus on positive thoughts failed to ease her worries. She had sensed Agios in her ceaseless moments of triune connect, but he had not appeared. She clutched at the bed covers. Sleep had been sporadic. How could she sleep when baby Moses was in the clutches of Keiko Bays? She rubbed her forehead impatiently. Her head still throbbed. Tears she thought were already done gathered and spilled over. After an evening of investigation, it was clear that baby Moses had indeed been abducted. But that his abductor had been one of their very own was shocking. Vohan Batten, previous Agri-Team Leader Assistant, member of the fishing crew, trusted friend of many, had been the traitor. There was a light knock on the door before Ruth entered, looking concerned. She closed the door softly, then came over to the bedside. I saw the light under your door. I knew you wouldn't be asleep. She sat down on the side of the bed, facing Hope. She looked tired. I'm sure you couldn't sleep either. Hope moved to create space beside her and patted it. Ruth slid in under the covers. She turned and draped an arm across Hope's shoulder. They leaned against each other companionably. "It's like my worst nightmare," Ruth said, sounding very sad. "I was very alone before the mist, with my parents both deceased and my one sibling living in another country. I've never really felt connected to anyone until life here. You, Boa, the others." Her voice faltered. Hope said, "And our baby." Hope allowed a moment as they shared grief, then asked the obvious question. "But why? How is Boa and Batson involved?" "Boa and I discussed it with Captain Nick," Ruth said. "We believe that Boa and Batson was a plant." "A plant?" Hope asked. "As in a spy?" "Yes." Hope was confused. "But how? If he is not a loyal, how was he able to survive on Eden 2 without the suit?" Ruth thought for a moment. "Remember Keiko Bays?" she asked. "How he did well at first, then needed the suit?" "Yes," Hope said. "It's probably something like that," Ruth said. "Notice how Vohan Batten started looking unwell but refused to be examined? Perhaps like Keiko, he was allowed here for a season, but then time started to run out." Hence his haggard look," Hope said. "Exactly." Something kept nagging at Hope. "Does that mean Agios allowed him? Prince Adani allowed him? Who exactly allowed him, and for what reason?" "Well," Ruth began, "we know the prince commands the will of his father, and Agios accomplishes it." "The emperor?" A sense of betrayal surfaced in Hope. "But why?" Ruth sighed. "As you know, we don't always understand the sovereign emperor's decision. We only know through belief and experience that his decisions are good. He has a plan in all of this." Hope groaned, throwing her head back against the wall. "What is his plan? Keiko Bays will fly in tomorrow, and I must go then." She straightened up. "Where is Agios? I need to ask him what's going on." Oh, what a distress for her. New scene. After seeming like dawn would never come, morning came all too soon. Hope had finished a hasty toilet before returning to her room. Ruth had stayed the night and left earlier, but now returned with Anna behind her. Both women sat on the side of the bed. They stared at Hope as if trying to gauge her state of mind. Anna had dark circles around her eyes. Obviously, her night had also been difficult. "I know why you're both here," Hope said as she moved around the small room, putting her toiletry items away. "I'm fine." They both nodded but looked unconvinced. Ruth spoke first. "You don't have to be brave in front of us, sweetie." "Yeah," Anna agreed. "We know how you feel." Her face flushed and crinkled as if she would cry. She stood up and came over to hug Hope. "It's going to be okay. Surely the sovereigns are aware and working something out." Hope received the hug stiffly at first, then her chilled heart warmed and her eyes grew moist. She returned Anna's hug. "You're right, of course. We're not to go by how things look, but just know that all will work out according to the sovereign emperor's plans." "And his plans are good, especially for us loyals," Ruth added, joining in the hug. Moments later, the three women entered the corridor on the ground floor, where they would proceed to the governor's chamber for further instructions. Ruth and Anna stood on either side of Hope, with their arms protectively around her. The entire island was on lockdown, with everyone apart from the military restricted to the compound. Word had already spread about baby Moses' abduction. News of Hope's own challenge remained classified so as not to cause alarm. A heightened sense pervaded the hall. Already, many looks were focused on Hope, with varied expressions of dismay, sympathy, shock. Hope! It was Boa with Captain Nick hurrying toward them from the direction of the lobby. As soon as they reached her, Boa took hold of Hope's arms and pulled her aside. "You don't have to go," he said. "The envoy won't be there." He moved closer to her and lowered his voice. "He has been killed." Confusion washed over her. "Keiko Bays was murdered," Boa reiterated. Oh my, there's a lot of changes, all right. Okay, to see what happens next, please join me next time for chapter 23. 23? No, we're way past that. 33. Take care, everyone.